The neighborhood of Willow Creek Estates was the kind of place that looked picture-perfect from the outside. Every home stood tall with manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, and spotless driveways. The streets were lined with oak trees that swayed gently in the breeze, casting symmetrical shadows across the pavement. Neighbors waved politely as they jogged past, their golden retrievers trotting alongside them. To the casual visitor, it was a slice of suburban paradise. The American dream wrapped neatly in white picket fences. But beneath the surface, Willow Creek had a reputation. It was governed by one of the most rigid and controlling homeowners associations, HOA, in the region, and its board was notorious for micromanaging every detail of its residents' lives. From the shade of your paint color to the type of flowers in your garden, nothing escaped their rulebook. And at the forefront of these standards stood one man who relished his authority more than anyone else. His name was Gerald Whitman, the self-appointed guardian of Willow Creek's perfection. Middle-aged, sharp features. Always dressed in a crisp polo tucked into Gerald was the HOA's compliance officer, though he often acted more like a sheriff patrolling his territory. Armed with a clipboard in one hand and a camera in the other, Gerald made it his mission to walk the neighborhood daily, inspecting every property with eagle-eyed scrutiny. A car parked too long on the curb, ticketed. Grass half an inch taller than regulation. Noti Eastwith, a wreath on the door that didn't match the season. Warning letter delivered. He believed he was maintaining standards, but most residents knew better. Gerald thrived on control. His sense of power didn't come from kindness or leadership, but from making others bend to rules he enforced with military precision. Many neighbors resented him but avoided confrontation. After all, one word from Gerald could mean fines, penalties, or worse, and Gerald loved the feeling. In his mind, order was everything. And anyone who didn't comply with that order, well, they didn't belong in Willow Creek. It was into this meticulously controlled world that Vanessa Carter moved one bright spring afternoon. Vanessa was a striking woman in her mid-30s, elegant yet approachable, with warm brown eyes and a calm presence that seemed to soften even the busiest of days. She drove up in a modest SUV, nothing flashy, and stepped out in a tailored navy dress that spoke of quiet success rather than flamboyant wealth. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as movers carried her boxers into the spacious two-story home at the end of the cul-de-sac. Some whispered curiously about her background. A young black woman moving alone into one of the most expensive neighborhoods in town was bound to spark speculation. Single, one neighbor murmured to another. "Where's she from?" someone else asked. "She must have money," another muttered, eyes narrowing. Vanessa, however, paid no mind. She greeted those who approached her with a polite smile, shaking hands, offering a kind word. She moved through her new home with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged. Not because she needed anyone else's approval, but because she had earned her place in life. And that quiet confidence was precisely what would put her on a collision course with Gerald Whitman, for Gerald believed that order came from enforcing respect. Vanessa would soon show him that true authority came from deserving it. It was a sunny morning, just days after Vanessa had moved in, when Gerald Whitman made his rounds. Clipboard in hand, camera at the ready, he strolled past the familiar rows of pristine homes with the air of a man on a mission. Nothing escaped his notice, every trimmed hedge, every mailbox flag. When he reached Vanessa's property, he stopped abruptly. A small detail caught his trained eye. Her mailbox had a tasteful decal on the side. A tiny, tasteful emblem that did not match the HOA's strict aesthetic guidelines. Gerald's face hardened. "This will not do," he muttered under his breath, tapping the clipboard. He clicked the camera to take a photo, imagining the violation letter he would write. "She doesn't even know the rules," he thought. "Someone needs to remind her what happens in Willow Creek." Without hesitation, he marched up the driveway. His steps were measured, deliberate, each one echoing with authority. He reached the front door and rang the bell with the precision of a man delivering judgment. When Vanessa opened the door, she greeted him politely. "Good morning. Can I help you?" Gerald didn't return the warmth. Instead, he adjusted his clipboard and began, "I'm Gerald Whitman, HOA compliance officer. I've noticed that your mailbox decal does not comply with community standards. This is a violation, and if it is not corrected immediately, fines may be imposed, and persistent violations can lead to further action." Vanessa's expression remained calm. She looked at Gerald with composed curiosity, not intimidation. "I see," she said quietly. "Thank you for letting me know. I will review the HOA guidelines and address it." Her tone was polite but firm. She did not apologize unnecessarily, and she did not try to charm or plead. Her confidence was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it radiated a quiet strength that unsettled Gerald more than he expected. "You'll need to remove that decal immediately," Gerald insisted, his voice sharpening. "Rules are rules. This is a community standard. Non-compliance will not be tolerated." Vanessa tilted her head slightly, considering him for a moment. "I understand your concern," she said. "However, I would appreciate discussing any requirements or exceptions with the board directly. I believe there may be options that comply without removing personal touches." Gerald's eyes narrowed. Most residents, when confronted like this, would have flustered, protested, or acquiesced. Vanessa did none of these. She calmly asserted her boundaries while respecting the process. Something Gerald had not anticipated. The confrontation drew attention from nearby neighbors who peeked over their fences. Gerald felt the weight of their eyes, their silent judgments. He straightened his back and adopted his most commanding tone. "Ma'am, I am responsible for enforcing HOA rules. This is not optional. You must comply immediately, or fines and further action will follow." Vanessa remained steady, her voice even. "I appreciate your dedication, but I am new here. I intend to follow the guidelines properly. Threats and ultimatums will not help either of us." Gerald's pride flared. Authority had always been his tool, his way of asserting control. Yet here was someone who was neither intimidated nor deferential. For the first time, he felt his control slipping. He raised his hand slightly, as if to gesture at her mailbox, a silent command to comply. "I expect this corrected today," he said, the edge in his voice unmistakable. "Consider this your final warning." Vanessa smiled faintly, unbothered by his tone. "Thank you for your concern. I will take care of it in accordance with the proper process." Gerald fumed silently as he walked back down the driveway. His authority had been subtly challenged, and he hated the feeling. In his mind, he had done his job perfectly, enforcing rules, maintaining order, and yet she had remained unshaken, her composure almost daring him to overstep. He glanced back at Vanessa, who was standing at her doorway, hands clasped, watching him leave. There was no fear in her eyes, no anger, just calm, measured confidence, and a hint of quiet amusement. That moment planted the seed of uncertainty in Gerald. Something about her did not fit the usual pattern. Most residents would have cowered, complained, or flinched. But Vanessa, she seemed untouchable, not by rules, but by her own quiet authority. Little did Gerald know the woman he had just tried to boss around. The one he assumed was a new, inexperienced homeowner was about to reveal a truth that would upend everything he thought he knew about power in Willow Creek. A week later, Gerald returned to conduct a routine HOA inspection of the neighborhood. He walked past perfectly trimmed hedges and uniform mailboxes, clipboard in hand, fully confident that he was enforcing the rules as always. When he reached Vanessa's property, he noticed movement near the front door. A sleek black car pulled up, and a group of HOA board members stepped out, dressed sharply for a scheduled community meeting. Gerald assumed they were here for standard inspections, or perhaps to approve a landscaping plan. He knocked firmly on Vanessa's door, intending to assert his authority. Before he could speak, Vanessa opened the door and greeted the board warmly. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Shall we begin the meeting?" Gerald froze, something in their expressions. The respect, the deferential nods, the subtle bow of heads made him step back slightly. He hadn't noticed before. But these people treated Vanessa differently. They deferred to her as though she held the highest authority. One of the board members cleared his throat and said, "As you all know, Ms. Carter has been elected as the new HOA president, effective immediately. She will be overseeing compliance, community standards, and all board decisions moving forward." A stunned silence fell over the driveway. Gerald felt his stomach drop. The woman he had been lecturing, threatening with fines, and trying to boss around was not just a resident. She was his boss, the very person who now had the power to reprimand him, reverse his actions, or question his every decision. Neighbors peeking from behind, curtains whispered, "Why, Dada?" Some stifled laughter. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Gerald's cheeks burned. Gerald's mind raced. He remembered his last visit. The way he had threatened her over a simple mailbox decal. The way he had assumed she was inexperienced. The way he had wielded authority like a weapon. And now, the entire dynamic had reversed. He was no longer the one in control. His rules, his ultimatums, his pride. All of it crumbled in an instant. Vanessa caught his gaze from the doorway. Her eyes were calm, measured, and unreadable. She did not smirk or gloat. She did not scold him publicly. Instead, her expression conveyed the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the outcome coming all along. Instead of humiliating him, Vanessa addressed Gerald politely. "Mr. Whitman, thank you for your dedication to maintaining our community standards. I know. Enforcing rules can be challenging. I look forward to working with you to ensure fairness and respect for all residents." Her words were like a mirror reflecting Gerald's own arrogance back at him. Without anger, without shame, simply truth delivered with calm authority. Gerald could hardly speak. He mumbled something about looking forward to collaborating while trying to mask the deep embarrassment he felt. The power shift was undeniable, and it stung. As Vanessa guided the board through the meeting, Gerald stepped back, his clipboard hanging awkwardly at his side. He realized that his rigid authority, once a source of pride, had blinded him to true leadership. Strength did not come from fear, intimidation, or strict enforcement alone. It came from knowledge, composure, and the respect one earned through character. And in that moment, Gerald understood. He had underestimated her, and in doing so, he had learned a lesson he would never forget. The neighborhood, once a place of rigid order, now seemed alive with a new energy. Respect, not fear, would define the community going forward. Thanks to the woman he had once tried to evict, now the very person who held ultimate authority. After the revelation, Vanessa led the HOA board meeting with a calm, commanding presence. She discussed policies, addressed concerns, and outlined a vision for the community that balanced fairness with respect. Every word she spoke carried authority, not the kind that intimidated, but the kind that inspired cooperation. Gerald stood to the side, clipboard in hand, still processing the shock. What struck him most was how she treated him. Not as a former adversary, but as a partner in the neighborhood's success. "Mr. Whitman," Vanessa said gently, "your attention to detail is valuable. I hope we can work together to ensure rules are followed while treating every resident with fairness and dignity." It was a simple statement, yet it carried immense weight. Gerald felt a wave of humility wash over him. He realized that leadership was not about domination or enforcing compliance out of fear. It was about guiding, listening, and earning respect. That evening, Gerald returned home, feeling the sting of embarrassment mingled with newfound insight. He replayed every interaction with Vanessa in his mind. The calm confidence with which she had stood her ground, her polite but firm responses to his threats, her ability to command respect without intimidation. He realized how often he had misused his authority in the past, judging residents based on appearances or minor infractions, rather than considering their intent or character. For the first time, he understood the difference between enforcing rules and serving a community. In the following weeks, Gerald's approach changed dramatically. He still inspected homes and ensured compliance, but his tone softened. His instructions became respectful, and he listened before acting. Residents noticed the change almost immediately. Where once they feared him, now they felt heard and respected. He learned to ask questions rather than issue ultimatums, to offer guidance rather than threats. And through it all, Vanessa's example remained in his mind. Authority earned through humility and competence was far more powerful than authority demanded through fear. By the end of the month, Gerald had grown into a better enforcer, a better community member, and a better person. He now understood the profound lesson that Vanessa had demonstrated without ever raising her voice. True leadership is not about power, position, or intimidation. It is about character, humility, and respect. Never judge a person by appearances, and never assume authority gives you superiority. In Willow Creek Estates, the lesson rippled through the neighborhood. Where fear once maintained order, respect now fostered community. And Gerald, the man who once tried to assert dominance over Vanessa, would never forget the woman who showed him the true meaning of authority. The story closes with a simple, powerful visual. Gerald walking down the perfectly lined streets of Willow Creek, clipboard in hand, but this time smiling slightly, nodding politely to residents, and pausing to offer guidance when needed. Vanessa watches from her porch, serene and confident, the true embodiment of leadership. Quiet, unassuming, yet undeniably commanding respect.